لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وأكرم المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. يقول الله تعالى في محكم كتابه المبين: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Today we're here to celebrate the birth of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And there's many virtues that we can talk about when we come to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Indeed, there's a whole book called Nahj al-Balāghah which talks about all his wisdoms and sayings. But for today, I want to focus on a topic which is called 7 deadly sins. And that's not the anime for the young people. And their opposite, the heavenly virtues. And we want to talk about it from an Islamic perspective, because this is something that we always hear about when we look at Christianity, for example. There's always the topic of the deadly sins. And we're going to look at it from the perspective of Imam Ali and his words and sayings. So the 7 major sins are pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. And their opposites are the heavenly virtues, which are humility, generosity, chastity, goodwill, moderation, patience, and diligence. So the first sin that we want to talk about is pride. Pride is the origin sin. It's a sin that Shaitan was casted away from heaven because of. Imam Ali alayhi salam in one of his sermons says, Allah will never allow a human to enter heaven with the same sin that he expelled an angel from. So from this we can see that pride is often linked to a lot of the sins that we see in our day-to-day life. Pride in Arabic means kibar or takabbur. And when we talk about pride, the definition we see is that it talks about considering oneself above others. Now we're going to talk about the different aspects of pride, because there are some pride that is actually recommended for Muslims. But the pride that we want to get away from is the pride that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and He has all the pride in heavens and earth. And one of the sermons of Imam Ali says, alayhi salam, praise be to Allah, who wore the dress of honor and pride and chose them both for Himself, giving not to His creatures. And then he continues saying, and Allah has cursed those of His servants who attempt to quarrel with Him over His quality, which is honor and pride. Elsewhere in the sermon says what we talked about, which is that Allah will never let a human being enter paradise for the same sin that He expelled an angel from it. This statement has to shake us to our core. Because when we talk about Iblis in Islamic perspective, Iblis is not an origin evil. Iblis is not an origin sin. When we look at the history of Iblis, in the same sermon, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, he has worshipped Allah for 5,000 years. We don't know, and Imam Ali does know, but he's saying, like us humans, we don't know if those years were earthly years or heavenly years. Because in other verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about years which one day in the day of judgment can be years in our time. So when we look at this, we have to consider the effect of pride that has on our belief and on our systems. We have to realize that no matter how much you pray, no matter how much you fast, no matter how much you do dhikr, hajj, umrah, sadaqah, all of that doesn't matter if there's pride in your heart. And this pride comes from different aspects, and it affects different aspects in your life as well. The Qur'an repeatedly warns us about pride, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Is there not in hell an abode for the proud?" Thus Allah, and another ayah, He says, "Enter the gates of hell to abide therein. How evil is the abode of the arrogant." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeatedly tells us about the folly of pride. And this is something that even affected one of the prophets that we know about, which is Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. We have a narration that says that when Prophet Yusuf became the Aziz of Masr, that he becomes like the top leader in Egypt, he brings his family along to live with him. And when there's different narrations about him going on a horse to meet them, and there's a different narration of him meeting them in the palace. And in both of these narrations, it says that when he sees his father, he does not get down from his horse, or he does not get down from his throne. And prophets are always bound to a higher level than us regular human beings. So that's considered tark al-awla, but for that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His angel and told him that this action displeased Allah. And because of this action, the line of prophethood did not continue from his lineage. From one action, one small action, it might not even be considered fully pride. But from one action that is attributed to pride, a whole consequence has happened. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also warns us from those who make fun of other people because of pride. He tells us, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, on the day of judgment, قال اخسأوا فيها ولا تكلمون إنه كان فريق من عبادي يقولون ربنا آمنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين فاتخذتموهم سخريا حتى أنسوكم ذكري وكنتم منهم تضحكون. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the day of judgment, those people who make fun of the believers, and we see sometimes this also in our communities, where if somebody's like very religious or very conservative, his friends like make fun of him, like, oh, you're not gonna eat at this place, come on, man, like, don't be too extremist. Like, I hear that a lot from like people outside of like the community. When I meet some Muslims, if I tell them, oh, I'm not gonna eat from this place, I don't know if it's halal or not, they're like, man, you're so extremist. Or if I'm doing fast on a day that's not wajib to do a fast, they're like, bro, come on, like, chill out. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us from making fun of those people. Now there is a different aspect of pride that is actually recommended. And that is the pride that you have in your religion. Whenever you see somebody making fun of your hijab, whenever you see somebody making fun of you because you're praying in the hallway at school, whenever somebody makes fun of you for fasting, for doing anything related to religion, that is the moment when you have to have pride. And this pride is not pride in oneself. This pride comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This pride comes from believing in His religion and following His commands. It's like when you have like a prime minister or something like that, or a president. You have his secretary. Everybody like bows down to him and respects him. Why? It's not because of the guy. It's because he's connected to another person. Whenever you have doubts about your religion, whenever you're questioning about your religion, that is when the pride should come in. You have to be proud of your Islamic identity. You should not bow down to peer pressure and comments from other people when it comes to religion. And you should never be embarrassed of practicing your religion publicly and privately. Because there are going to be a lot of people in your life, the older ones know, the younger ones will experience it, where people are going to make fun of you for whatever reason. That is when the pride of your religion has to come in. That is when the pride that is truly recommended has to come in. The pride that you have in your religion. The pride that you know that because of these actions that you're following, that you're going to be guided to the right path and that you will enter heaven. Now, next to pride comes greed, or called avarice. And with greed, it's a disease that holds your heart. Greed in Arabic called hirs or tama. And that is when you have excessive desires for worldly things. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, "He who is greedy is disgraced, and greed is everlasting slavery." And the Prophet alayhi salam, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, salawat, he said, "Two hungry wolves let loose among sheep are not more destructive than a man's greed for wealth and status is to his religion." We see with greed that there's an aspect of pride in greed as well, where people who are wealthy, for example, they think that the wealth that they have, or the kids that they have, or the heritage that they have, is something that is inherently gained by them. So they have this belief, this pride in themselves that I have gained all of this myself. And there are a lot of verses that talk about the kafirin, where it says, "Why don't you give to those who are poor or needy?" They reply, they say, okay, if Allah is the Almighty, He can give them whatever He wants. Don't take from our money. Don't take from our wealth. The greed has blinded their eyes. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, shall I be satisfied with being called leader of the faithful, but not share in the hardship of the people? Shall I leave myself to luxuriate like a beast fed in a pen while others go hungry? Imam Ali alayhi salam describes those people who are greedy as beasts in a pen. Because when we see ourselves in this dunya, we are really in a cage. We're in a cage where if we don't see anything outside of it, this is all that there is. You see people who are living for this dunya, they collect money and keep collecting, millionaires, billionaires. What are you going to do with all that money? They have so much money that they don't have any ability to spend it, but they keep collecting, they keep doing practices to incur more wealth. You see a lot of times like businesses and companies, they're gonna lay off 2,000 people from work. They're gonna lay off 30,000 people. Why? Oh, now we have AI and now we have these things and we can improve the processes and we can increase our profit margins. But at the end of the day, what do you gain from doing all of that? Once you enter the grave, there's a saying, there's a narration where you meet different things when you enter the grave. The first thing is your money. And you tell your money or your wealth, I have spent so much time on you. I've worried so much about you. I spent all my life working for you. What are you going to give me now? I'm going to the grave. What are you going to give me? The wealth says, I'm going to give you this kafan, and that's it. The man then goes to his family. He says, I raised you so much. I cared about you so much. What are you going to give me? They're going to say, we're going to bury you in this grave, and ma'as-salama. The third thing is the a'mal, whatever you did in this world. The man asks, I've been so miserly with you. I've been so not caring about you. What are you going to give me? The a'mal tells him, I'm going to be your buddy in the grave. I'm going to be your roommate. And we're going to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment. And that's where you're going to meet your judgment. So when you see the effects of greed, you don't have anything at the end of it. There's nothing that you gain from it. When we see this world in the lens of the afterlife, greed becomes something that is really not existent. It becomes something so small, so insignificant. And the cure for greed actually is the opposite of greed, generosity. In one of the most famous ayahs about Ahl al-Bayt is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they give food to the needy, the orphan, and the captive. We feed you for the sake of Allah, seeking neither reward nor thanks from you. And Imam Ali alayhi salam also says, the nourishment of the body is food, while the nourishment of the soul is feeding others. We have to examine something in ourselves, brothers and sisters, which is the laws of the universe. We know the law of gravity. When you have something high and you let it go, it falls down. But there's other laws that we really need to believe in if we're to be true believers. One of these laws is the act of giving, charity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises you that whatever you give in charity, Allah will give you back 10 times. That is a law of the universe. There's other laws such as those, but for those people who are lacking in belief, they don't see these laws as truth. They see it as something like metaphysical, something spiritual, but they don't actually examine the deep truth within it. Is that just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made materialistic laws for this world, law of gravity, law of motion, there's also laws that are beyond our understanding. And just as a proof of that, did the law of gravity exist before Newton discovered it? Yeah. So just because we didn't discover this law, does it mean it didn't apply? An apple before Newton, when it fell, it just floated into the heavens? And then when we discover the law now is true? So we have to examine ourselves with all of these laws. There's many different laws in Islam which Islam talks about. One of these laws is generosity, is giving. When you give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you back in this world and the hereafter. And another thing is when you look at rich people or people who are running after money, are they ever satisfied? Did they ever make like $1 million and be like, okay, I'm good enough now. I'm gonna rest. Or they make $1 billion, okay, that's good enough. Or Elon Musk becomes the richest man in the world. He quits his company, goes to an island, is like, yeah, that's good enough for me. No. Going after the greed is never ending. So Imam Ali alayhi salam in one of his famous quotes says, "Al-qana'atu kanzun la yafna." When you have contentment in your heart, when you have contentment with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, it really shows you that when you are content with what you have been given, that is when you're truly rich. That is when you're truly satisfied. Greed can never end in satisfaction. Greed only keeps going. It's like a snake eating itself. It keeps going and going and going. Whereas when you reach to contentment, that is when you reach spiritual relief. That is when you're actually content with your life. That's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about zahideen, or the imams, and the Prophet talks about zuhad, it talks about them saying, you see them as if they're rich, like the way they carry themselves, the way that they're satisfied with themselves. They act as if they're the richest person on the earth. They have no worries about money, about where their rizq is coming from. I don't know if I mentioned, I think I mentioned this in one of my previous lectures, where a man comes to the Prophet and he talks to him about, like, he has a weird wife. Whenever he goes home, she greets him, and if she sees him like looking sad or like downcast, then she says, "What are you sad about? If you're sad about this dunya or your rizq, then there's somebody who's already taking care of it, Allah. And if you're sad about your afterlife or you're thinking about your afterlife, then may Allah increase your worry." And the Prophet says, this is one of the workers of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has workers in this dunya, and this is one of the workers, because they have realized the true meaning in this life, which is letting go of greed and embracing contentment and just worrying about the afterlife. A believer is not somebody who doesn't have worries, brothers and sisters. If you are somebody without worries, there's something wrong with you. A believer is somebody who has worries, deep worries. Sayyid Muhammad Rada Shirazi says, a believer is somebody who smiles in the face of others, but carries deep worry and sadness within their heart. But all of that is for the afterlife. They worry about their a'mal. They worry about what they're doing. They worry about their actions. But it's only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the worldly desires, they go away, but it's replaced by worry of the afterlife, which is how we should. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The third sin that we're going to look at is lust, and the opposition, which is chastity. Now we have to understand, in Islam, we look at things in a comprehensive way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that in this world, there's no such thing as an ideal situation. That there is no such thing as perfect scenario. We see in the Western worlds a lot of times that people, whenever there's like a situation, they always like blame one side. They're like, oh, the man shouldn't have done this. It's actually the opposite of the Eastern culture, where if something happens between a man and a woman, they say the woman is at fault. And the Western society is the opposite. And if you ever talk about the woman, like, oh, she didn't dress well, or she wasn't at the right place, they call it victim blaming. But Islam realizes that this world that we live in, there are rules and regulations, and there are truths. The truth of the matter is, men have more lustful desires than women. Men look at women in a completely different way than women look at men. So when Islam tackles this issue, it tackles it from both sides. When we talked about the lecture in the birth of Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, we talked about how the ayah starts with the men. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. And then it talks about the women. But it also emphasizes a lot the aspect of hijab, an aspect of modesty. And even Fatima Zahra alayhi salam says the best thing for a woman to do is for no man to see her and for her to see no man. And the closest woman to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when she's in the deepest room in her house. From this, we can see that Islam tackles this in different aspects. First, on the men's side, you can't always blame women, especially in the society that we live in. When we first came into Canada, I remember complaining to my dad, I'm like, look at all these women, like, look at what they're wearing. This is so shameful. And he tells me, like, jokingly, at least you're going to get a lot of hasanat when you do ghadh al-basar. When you keep your eye away from them, you're going to get a lot of ajr. And there's also a narration where it says, if you look at a woman and then look at the heavens to like avert your eyes, the angels of heaven are going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness for your sins. If you look down on the ground, the angels of the earth are going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask Allah to forgive your sins. And if you close your eyes, then both the angels of heaven and earth are going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive your sins. So from this, we can see that there is a duty from the man's side, which is to avert their gaze. And there's a duty from the woman's side, is that they have to dress appropriately. And this dressing appropriately goes to both genders, by the way. We have a saying like, oh, if a man goes in his shorts or in his boxers, it's okay, but a woman can't go outside. But that's not actually true in Islam. In Islam, there's both modesty for men and women, but it's because of how different genders interact with the other gender, there's different commands for them. For the men, wherever they are, they have to avert their gaze. For the women, wherever they are, they have to dress modesty. So for practical guidance on how to achieve chastity is first guard your senses. And this goes for both men and women. You have to avert your gaze whenever there's something you shouldn't look at. And you also have to avoid places, if you can, that have those places. So for example, you can't go to like a party or something like that where you know people are gonna dress immodestly and be like, whatever, like I can't do anything about that. Avoiding that is also one of the steps. Second thing is modest dress and behavior. Modesty does not only attribute it to dressing, it's also behavior. So the interactions with the other gender. Don't talk to like strange women. Don't interact with the other gender, even if the interaction itself is pure. Because a lot of times what happens, those pure interactions, you interact once, twice, messages here and there, and then it leads to problems. So keep your interactions with the other gender at a minimum. Third thing is marriage and fasting. In Islam, it's recommended heavily to marry early. And also, one of the ways, if you're not married, to keep this desire away is fasting. Because you guys remember when you're in the month of Ramadan, and you even see this from non-believers, everybody becomes a ma'soom, mashallah. Everybody's like, oh, they do everything outside of Ramadan. In Ramadan, you know, I'm fasting, I can't look at this. Oh, it's Ramadan, I can't do ghibah. Oh, it's Ramadan, I can't do this. So fasting itself, when you know the rules of fasting, it encourages you to stay away from those things. Fourth thing is remembering of Allah and the afterlife. We talked about hadim al-ladhat. Remembering death destroys everything. There was a show, like, there was an interesting cartoon show about a character that can see, that has X-ray vision. So whenever they look at a person, they just see bones and like muscles and stuff like that. And the main character is like a handsome guy. So all the girls are after him, but he doesn't show any interest to anybody, because he just sees like bones and like muscles and like blood vessels and stuff like that. There was actually a museum, like I think at the Spark Telecenter, where they showed like different body parts, like human body parts, where they remove the skin, for example, and they just show the bones. Or even if you look at anatomy books, if you're a medical student or are into that field, you see like the body parts of human beings. And when you look at it, you're like, there's no shahwa there, there's no interest there. So when you remember afterlife, you remember like what are you gonna end up as? One of the strongest images that you can think of is when you enter the grave. At first you enter, your body is complete. 1 week after, the worms start like crawling in your body. And after a period of time, the parasites and insects grow in your brain and they come out of your nose and eyes and stuff like that. Yeah, the image is disgusting. But this is the image you have to put in your head whenever you're in one of these situations where your shahwa is starting to flare up. That's going to destroy all your desires. Next, we want to look at envy, hasad. And envy is one of the things that is sadly, I believe, is popular in our culture. Hasad is when you are jealous of somebody and wish that whatever they had is taken away from them. Now there's a different aspect of it, which we'll talk about, which is recommended actually. But hasad, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, envy is one of Satan's greatest trap. And the Prophet ﷺ says, beware of envy, for envy devours good deeds like fire consumes dry wood. If you've ever been in camping, you know how that works. So hasad is something that Imam Ali alayhi salam actually says, I've not seen an oppressor who's more like the oppressed than the envious person. Constant anguish, a heart consumed by grief. And another saying, he says, the envious person experiences with his own soul the harm he wishes for others. When you look at an envious person, you see they're always filled with malice. And it's something that burns in their heart. A lot of times, the envious person is actually the one that harms themselves the most. It's not anything else. It's the envy within their heart. It burns their soul. It burns their actions. And it leads them to actions that are going to lead them to hellfire. Hasad is something that is admonished, but there is a version of it that is actually good, which is envy, but without wishing the other person to lose it. This is very common in aspects of religion, for example. If you see somebody who's very religious and you're jealous of their religiousness, this can push you to become more religious. When you see somebody successful and you're jealous of their success, but you don't wish harm upon them, this pushes you to work towards that success. So envy in a smaller form can actually be something that pushes you to work towards something, to achieve something greater. But you have to make the distinction of wishing harm upon others and wishing the success of others for yourself. And Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I do not wish to be one of the envious, for they are the losers in life. And you really see that in life. You see the person who's envious. They're not doing anything, sitting there. Maybe they don't have a job, and they're envious of somebody who's rich. What kind of a loser that guy is? Like, if you want to be rich, go and work towards it. Why are you like wishing harm upon others? So the way to cure envy is actually by showing goodwill and doing dua on the person who you're envious of. So Imam Ali alayhi salam says, if you cannot be happy for someone, at least do not resent them. Remember whatever they have was given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the points that I want to tie back to pride in. The envious person is somebody who's proud. Why? Because if somebody else has something, why would you be envious of them? One of the reasons is that you think that you're better than that person. Like, why should that person be successful? I'm better than them. That thing should belong to me. So pride comes in, as I said, in these different aspects, where it actually influences what happens. So the Prophet ﷺ says, and this is something everybody knows, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. That is, if you're looking at a measurement of belief, there was once like a story about a alim. He's like a big alim. I don't remember exactly his name. He was in a majlis, and the reciter or the lecturer was like, okay, I have given you guys a lot of lectures. I've given you a lot of sermons. Let's test you guys. Because one of the ayats in the Qur'an says that the true believers are those who, when they remember Allah, they start crying. So this alim was nervous. He's like, have I been doing like everything for vain? Am I really going to fail this test? So when the reciter started reciting Allah and remembering Allah and all that stuff, he started crying. And when he started crying, he did the sujood. They asked him, why did he do sujood at that moment? He's like, I thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I was one of the believers. So one of the really important aspects of a believer, and this you have to examine within yourselves, brothers and sisters. This is something practical. This is not something like we just say. Because a lot of times we just say things, مَا أَكْثَرَ الْعِبَرِ وَأَقَلَّ الْاعْتِبَارِ, as Imam Ali alayhi salam says. There's a lot of examples, but there's not a lot of people who ponder these examples. We have to test ourselves. Whenever something happens to somebody else, we have to think, we have to look at ourselves. Do we feel happy for that person? Or do we feel envy and jealousy for them? This is something practical that I would like everybody to test themselves with. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The fifth sin is gluttony. And gluttony can be sometimes defined as excessive desire for food. Sadly, I'm one of those afflicted with it, as you can see. So the Qur'an says, eat and drink, but do not be excessive. Surely Allah does not love those who are extravagant. And the Prophet ﷺ says, fill the stomach 1/3 with food, 1/3 with drink, and leave 1/3 empty for easy breathing. And this is a problem that we have in our culture, honestly. Because whenever you get invited to lunch or dinner, we've been invited to some of the brothers and sisters' houses, they put a whole table for us, 10 different kinds of food. And they're like, we didn't do anything. And you eat enough to fill your stomach, and they're like, you didn't eat anything. You must not like the food. You must not like us, huh? Go get another round of food. So we have this culture of like excessive giving. And this is in part good because it relates to generosity, but this is something we have to like really be mindful of, which is being excessive in anything that we consume. Whether it's food, whether it's materialistic things, gluttony can also cover a wider aspect of things. It can cover things like materialistic things that you have. I have this thobe. If I buy 10 other ones, when am I gonna ever wear them? I have more than the days of the week. Do I really need that much stuff? When we look at food, do we really need to consume that much stuff? And one of the things that you can actually do to improve your faith is that abstaining from something that is haram is something that is very basic. But Imam Ali and all the Imams show us that in order to actually fight the inner beast that you have within you, is that you have to sometimes abstain from something that is also halal. Like, you see a lot of food in front of you, it's halal food. There's nothing that's stopping you from eating and indulging. But restrain yourself. Sometimes if you see like a sweet that you like, just stop yourself from eating it. Sometimes you want to do something that is halal, just hold yourself from doing it. This is actually how you train yourself. When you have a horse that is wild, at first the horse is kicking and running and doing whatever. The trainers come and teach it. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the horse starts becoming calm. This is the same thing that you have to do with your nafs. Even with things that are halal, you have to stop yourself from doing them all the time. You have to stop yourself from giving in. Because this is one of the gateways to sin. Is that if you're weak-willed against something that is halal, what stops you from doing something that is haram? Because desires, they're called desires for a reason. When the moment comes, when the desire comes, it's something that is almost unstoppable. It's something that you feel that you have to do. But when you teach yourself to say no, just like when you have a kid, if you give the kid everything that they want, they're going to become spoiled brats. But when you tell them once or twice, no, you're not going to have that sweet, they're going to learn. I'm not going to get my way every time. So this is how you practice your faith. Faith is not something that is only applicable when it's the moment, when the test comes. You have to always practice for it. If you have a final exam and you have never studied, but you just attended the classes, chances are that you're not gonna get a very high mark. But if you study and practice every single day, then when that moment comes up, when that moment that defines you, you're gonna be a winner. We can see this from like, one of the best examples is the hur. When before the Battle of Karbala, we see that there are some instances that happened with him. One of the instances is that because the Hur was following them, Imam Hussein alayhi salam told him, "Thakalatka ummuk." That means, may you die and may your mom grieve over you. The Hur said, if I didn't know that your mother is Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, I would have said the same thing back to you. But because I know your mother is Fatima Zahra, daughter of the Prophet, I will not say anything to you. The second instance is that when it came time for prayer, Imam Hussein told him, you lead your guys in prayer and I'll lead my people. The Hur said, no, you lead us all in prayer. So when the time came, when the test came for Hur, he said, إِنِّي أُخَيَّرُ بَيْنَ الْجَنَّةِ وَالنَّارِ. I'm being given a choice between hellfire and heaven. And that's not an easy choice, brothers and sisters. We always say, يَا لَيْتَنَا كُنَّا مَعَكُمْ, all this stuff. But when you're facing an army of 10,000 with 70 people, not a lot of people are going to stand with the 70, even if they're on the truth. But because of the actions of Hur, because of the things that he did before the test came, when the test came, he made the right choice. So we have to discipline our souls. We have to make sure that we don't always give in. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I know this lecture has been long, but we're almost done. Two more to go. So the next one is wrath. And this is something that afflicts the men more than women. The wrath is uncontrollable anger. Imam Ali alayhi salam attributes it as al-ghadabu junoon. Anger is a kind of madness. And you see that a lot, actually. This is one of the most popular examples. You see sometimes stories about murders and stuff like that. They say I was in a moment of rage. I just saw red. And I did whatever I did. And after it happened, I realized what happened and I was regretful. So Imam Ali says the beginning of it is insanity and the end of it is remorse. If you don't get angry, you retain your mind. If you do, you must be ready to repent. Because anger always leads to something that is unwanted. In your rational mind, whenever you're not angry, you're going to look back and be like, why did I do that? When you're talking to somebody, your friend, your husband, your wife, in that moment of anger, you might say something and that thing completely changes your relationship. So whenever you have anger, and this is something, by the way, whenever you hear somebody who's angry, the Prophet says anger is from shaitan. But whenever somebody's angry and you say anger is from shaitan, do istighfar, they get even more angry. They're like, it's not the time, okay? Let me just vent. Let me just be angry for a bit. But we can see from the life of Imam Ali how we can tackle this anger. In the Battle of Khandaq, when we know the fight that happened between him and Amr bin Wad, when he was laying down on the ground and Imam Ali was almost about to strike him, he spit in Imam Ali's face. So Imam Ali started going around. He went away from him, started walking. And then he came and killed him. People asked him after that, why did you do that? He said, when he spat on me, I felt a surge of anger, nafsiyya. And by the way, brothers and sisters, this is an important aspect that we have to focus on. Because sometimes we focus on the general story and we don't focus on the details. The Imam felt anger. The Imam is not a robot that just worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imam has human emotions. So the Imam felt anger when he spat on him. Had I struck him then, he said, it might have been for my own anger, not purely for Allah. So I waited until I was composed and only fighting for truth, not personal revenge. And this is something that we have in ourselves, which is whenever we get angry, there's also like this popular thought, like if somebody harms me by one step, I'm gonna harm them by 10. If somebody like belittles me, I'm gonna belittle them even more. And in Islam, this is not something that is accepted at all. Even when it comes for justified revenge, you only take whatever was taken from you. If an arm was taken from you, you take an arm. If somebody was killed from your tribe or family, you only take one life. You don't go on a massacre. And this only comes when you're in a rational state of mind. Because when you're angry, you're not sane. So when we look at anger, the way to combat it is sabr and hilm. And one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Halim. So Imam Ali alayhi salam says, Al-hilmu sayyidul akhlaq. Forbearance is the master of all morals. Because when you have hilm, a lot of the things that happen in dunya starts to resolve itself. Sometimes you have a conflict with somebody. If you engage with that person, the conflict just escalates. It escalates and escalates until it leads to a bad situation. But when you have the patience, when you have the hilm, when you have the forbearance, even when you're the mazloom, by the way, when you're the one in the wrong, that is not called patience, that is called consequences. But when you're the one in the right, and you're the one on the right side of the conflict, and you still hold yourself, that is the meaning of patience and hilm. And that is something that we have to practice in our day-to-day lives, brothers and sisters. Because a lot of times we think that patience is only for like when we do something wrong, or like because of our sins, we have to be patient. But patience only truly comes when you're the one who's mazloom. You're the one who's on the right path, but you have to have that patience. So some ways to combat wrath is first, seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do istighfar. Continuously do istighfar and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second thing is silence. And this is key. Whenever you're angry, do not engage. Whenever you're mad, do not stay in that situation. Because the more you talk, the more mistakes that are going to happen. من كثر كلامه كثر خطأه ومن كثر خطأه قل حياؤه إلى أن دخل النار. So whenever you talk too much, that's when you're going to lead to problems. So silence is key. Whenever you're angry, do not speak. Hold yourself in. Even if the other person keeps going. Sometimes, like you're in a situation where the other person keeps talking and talking and talking, and you're like, I need to reply to this person. No. In that moment of anger, silence. Third thing is change your posture. If you're standing, sit down. If you're sitting, lie down. Change your posture. Don't stay in that same state that you're angry in. Fourth thing is doing wudu. It's said that anger is from shaitan, and shaitan is made from fire. So to quench the fire, you have to use water. So doing wudu is going to calm your anger. Fifth thing, if you can, leave the situation. You're discussing, you're having a conflict with somebody, just leave the situation. Because when you're saying in it, you're just going to keep boiling in. You're going to keep saying like, this person did this to me. How could they do this to me? I'm on the right side of the things. I'm on the side of justice. So your ego and shaitan is going to keep reminding you about these things. So the best way is to just stay away from that situation. Final thing is remembering consequences. We all have situations where we were angry and we did something that we regretted. This applies to everybody, especially the older people. There's always some situation that you can remember. They're like, I wish I didn't say this thing to that person. I wish I didn't do this thing. I wish I didn't stay in that situation. So remember the consequences. Remember how many times have you been angry and you did something and that thing was ended in a good way. Most of the times, it's never. And we have to remember one main tenet in Islam, which is sabr. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, "As-sabr min al-iman kal-ra's min al-jasad. فلا خير في جسد لا رأس معه ولا في إيمان لا صبر معه." Patience in regards to belief is like the head in regards to the body. If you cut somebody's head off, there's no use for the body. The body is already dead. And if you cut the patience of somebody off, that person doesn't have patience, they're going to do all kinds of actions. They might regret it later, but they're going to do it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The last thing we want to talk about, I'm sorry for keeping you this long, is sloth, which is the sin of laziness. A lot of times, sloth is something which leads to delays of work. In the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes those people when He says, when they stand for prayer, they stand lazily, kusala. And He talks about the believers in the opposite way and say, work. Soon Allah, His Messenger, and the believers will see your work. When we look at a lot of problems in our life, a lot of times we say, like, why is our country not the way that other countries are? Or why is our community so behind in regards to other communities? A lot of it is attributed to laziness. We procrastinate. Prayer time comes right now. I have this thing to do. Okay, I'm checking something on my phone. I'm gonna stand up for prayer. Don't worry. Like, there's 5 hours until the next prayer. So I'm gonna get it done. But like, let me just keep scrolling on TikTok or keep reading this thing or keep playing this game. And this becomes a disease. You see, a lot of times the people who are lazy, they're lazy in all aspects of life. They're lazy in their work. They're lazy in their duties. They're lazy in their faith. Whereas when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about believers, He talks about them as people who are running towards good deeds. People who are يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. People who want to be one of the first people to do good deeds. A lot of times when I was a kid, when we were in the mosque, when the time for prayer came, I see people running to the first row. And sometimes to the right of the first row. Why? Because they say there's more ajr if you pray behind the imam, and there's more ajr if you pray on the right of the side of the imam. So you see people like running to be the first in the first line of prayers. This is how we should act in everything related to our faith and work. Somebody who's a believer is not only somebody who focuses on their akhirah. They also are the first people who work for their dunya for their akhirah. So a believer is not somebody who's lazy in their work. They're somebody who's like studious, on time, because this reflects on the whole religion. If all the Muslimin at work were lazy, they don't do a good job, what is going to be the impression of non-believers? They're going to be like, yeah, Islam, like those people, like those Muslimin, they're all lazy. There's going to be a negative stereotype on Islam in general. So laziness is discouraged from this world and the work for the after. So we have to always be going to do the good deeds. We have to be one of the first people who go and do good deeds. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Imam Ali alayhi salam stated that I dislike to see a man lazy in any of his affairs, religious or worldly. So this aspect in religion, we have to always pray on time. We have to always see what is going on. Like it's the month of Rajab. One of the deeds that you can do is do istighfar 100 times and then do sadaqah after it. Another good deed is on Fridays, reading Surah Al-Ikhlas 100 times. How many of you have, before the month of Rajab entered, opened Mafatih al-Jinan and looked at the a'mal of Shahr Rajab? Be one of the first people who get ready and prepared. We're in the month of Rajab, we're going into Sha'ban and then Ramadan. Are you prepared for the month of Sha'ban? Are you prepared for the month of Ramadan? Do you know the a'mals that you should be doing during those months? It is those people who are going to be the ultimate winners in life. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ آفَّةٌ وَآفَّةُ الْعَقْلِ الْكَسَلِ. So we see that laziness affects everything in our life. It affects our mind. It affects our actions. It affects our work and our results. One other saying in Khutbat al-Wasila says, الفرص تمر كمر السحاب فانتهزوا فرص الخير ما أمكنت وإلا عادت ندما. When you have a chance, when you have an opportunity, when you have the month of Rajab coming, seize that chance. Maybe next year you're not here. Who knows? Because once the chance is over, it's gone forever. It is said on the day of judgment, your work is going to be displayed to you as if like boxes, or sometimes it's called books. Every period of time is called sa'a in Arabic, but it's like a period of time basically. Every period of time is going to be recorded. So sometimes you're going to open a box and you're going to see good deeds. You're going to be happy and smiling. I did good deeds during this period. You open another box, you see filth, maggots, snakes. That is the time that you have did a sin. And then you see other times, which I believe affects most of us. You see it empty. And that's when you have the most remorse that you have in your life. You see this box is empty. There's nothing in it. It's like if the Christmas time came around, it's like if you're celebrating Christmas, you give somebody a box as a gift, they open it, there's empty. What kind of sadness that they would have? Even if they have something bad or something they don't like, they're going to be like, okay, at least I got something. Like I got a small good deed. but nothing, that's the worst kind of feeling you're going to have. So to combat laziness, try to make a daily schedule. For example, there's apps, there's a couple of counter apps on Android and Apple Store. You can put your tasbih and dhikr and stuff like that in there. Be like, okay, I have to do 400 times astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh today. Set a reminders for yourself. Oh, I have to do this dhikr. Sometimes it's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh, I didn't do my dhikr. I have to go and do it. Make a to-do list. Second thing, start your day early. Don't wake up at 11 o'clock or at midnight, at noon, and start your day then. You're going to see like half of your day is already over, and your day is all basically empty. I see a lot of girls laughing. See some guilty people here, I guess. Third thing is seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. We have to remember, brothers and sisters, that every action that we do is because of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In one of the munajat of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he says, "O Allah, even if I mentioned your dhikr until my mouth fell off, even if I did ruku' for you until my knees gave out, even if I did sujood for you until I bludgeoned my head, I would not have given you back one blessing that you have given to me." Because even the dhikr that we do, even the things that Allah gives us tawfiq to do, this is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why, brothers and sisters, you have to focus on your daily actions. If you're doing dhikr every day and one day you forget, or if you're doing salat al-layl every day and one day you forget, or you get too lazy, or you get too sleepy, start looking at your actions. See what you did wrong. Because when that tawfiq is taken away from you, you have to know that this is because of an action that you have done. One of the great scholars that we have back in the day, a man came to him and he saw him crying. He says, what happened? Did a relative of yours die? Did something happen to you? Did you lose money? He's like, yesterday, I wasn't able to get up to do Salat al-Layl. Now I'm trying to figure out, what did I do? What mistake did I do that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took this tawfiq away from me? So make sure that you sit with yourself whenever you notice this. If you start seeing there's delays in your salat, like you always used to pray on time, but one day you delayed your salat. Or maybe one day you didn't wake up for salat al-subh. Or you do some mustahabbat and one day you forgot to do them. Start thinking, what did you do wrong? What mistakes did you do? Maybe you did ghiba on somebody. Maybe you hurt somebody's feelings. Maybe you took something from somebody and that person wasn't satisfied with it. So be careful of your actions. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.